My name is Renard. I'm an historian and a game designer. Today I will speak as an historian. How many historians are here? Not a lot. Okay. Huh? Yes, definitely. And this is why you are cheering this session. So I'm from the University of Athens, fellow researcher in the Department of Italian Language and Literature. What is the connection between this department and this conference? There is no connection, and for this reason, I came here to talk to you today. What if the return of Martin Guerre was adapted to a popular video game? 16th century, a peasant from France moving to go to war in Spain. If he come back to his village just to find out an imposter in his place with his wife, and this is how the story thickens. So the Return of Martin Guerre by Zemon Davis is a very popular historical book, highly recommended, which was actually also a film, 1982, Gérard Depardieu, now in legal proceeding, but back then handsome. And Zemon Davis was actually working on the film set as a consultant, and more than that, she was really involved. And this inspired her to write the book. So the film is 82, but she wrote the book in 83. And a game about the return of Martin Guerre would probably look like the one on the right. The game does not exist. We will see a lot of fictional games here. And the fact that it doesn't exist is why we are here. History has been slow to see video games as valid medium, right? And the result is, of course, that audience play with history, but historians really rarely shape how it is represented. So what if Natalie Zemon Davis was a game creator also, because she's a historian? She was a historian. So for games to do history, historians must go beyond the level of consultment, what's happening right now. They should co-create, become co-creators of historical games. How can they do these things? They can do adaptations, which we are going to talk today. It means transforming my thesis, somebody else's thesis in history, into a playable prototype. They can do exploration. It means that you take a game, and by the data that the game produces, or by playtesting or by simulation, you kind of reflect on historical process. Very attractive. Citizen science, simulation, and so forth. Dissemination, what we basically know, and I'm not going to talk about it at all, like museums, cultural heritage, etc. Least interested in this part. And the last one might be the more radical one, which means that you basically create a game about history, and by the creation of the game, you kind of reflect by design and art about how history is made, and also about how games are made, or the connection between them. Is the act of creation itself is the research, is producing critical reflection, highly relevant for game studies as a discipline, and might be also relevant to historical discipline. Let's talk about adaptations. So I try to collect games that were created directly by historians, and there's not quite a lot of them. I can give you the names later on. We'll move forward. Pentiment, Pentiment is probably the most famous one, created by a historian hobbyist, which is not really an historian, claiming to be an historian. So this is the moment where historians are starting to sweat. But so you can see the problem. But let's talk about a much more interesting game and highly relevant in a national level, really a pioneer in Greece, I would say, Apostolos Debis from Crete, from the University of Rethymno, from Fort, that created as part of his research conducted here actually in Syros. He was downtown here in Mayuli Square in the archive, working on Syrian shipping in the times of the transition between sail and engines and steamships. And I guess that at some point during this research, he went out to coffee. He asked himself, oh my God, all this research that I do here, all these sheep owners, the money, the economy, and everything, it's a game. It's like a game. And then he created a board game, which is part of his ERC. It's funded by the ERC project. It's part of the dissemination of his research. So we can kind of postulate that it represents something from an historical process, not just a civilization game. That does the contemporize so history in the same way. So what they are doing in the same way, this is another question we have to ask Apostolos. This is maybe one of the only games that in the market that not only convey a thesis of an historian, but actually try also in a very conscious way to show how history is created. So what I did in my research and is to try to see how can design process be adapted to meet historiographical standards, and what would it mean for historians to treat games as vehicles for writing history? Should there be any framework? And I'm not a I'm not a fan of frameworks, but I did a heuristic tool, which is kind of a creative tool. I put two axes in parallel. One is coming from game studies. It's the longest tension in game studies. I'm sure all of you, no need for introduction, narratology and simulations. And the other ones come from historiography. It's one of the longest tensions between individuality and generalization, meaning either I'm a mouse of an archive and I'm doing all my life like something, I very know how much salt there is in the sack of the donkey in the 16th century, or I'm coming to a podium and I'm talking about generalization and talking about periods and doing what. Both are valid histories. I'm not, no, I don't have any bias here. So Apostolos Delis is somewhere here, if we take him into consideration, because it's definitely a simulation. It's like a monopole sieve. And also for doing an ERC project, if you read his book, he had to do, in order to get funded for an ERC, you have to do quite a lot of generalization. I mean, he was working here in the archive of Syros, but he kind of reflect on the entire Mediterranean in a period. He cannot do any other thing, so which is a good thing. So he's, I will put him here. So what I did in my research is just inventing fictional games. I took one book that I really like, I took one game that I really like, and I tried to pair them together and to see what happens when I use the arguments of the thesis and the, the game structure, in this case, for example, a visual novel. Let's move on to show one, and with this I will conclude. I don't know if you are aware of the games of San Barlo. I really like them. They are games which are FMV, full motion videos. And I also really like The Cheese and the Worm of Carlo Ginzburg, which is, again, a microhistory about a 16th century miller that was investigated by the Inquisitions 2 times during his life. So let's, for those who doesn't know, her story, straight from Steam, sits you in the front of a desktop computer that's logged into a police database of video footage. The footage covers 7 interviews from 1994 in which a British woman is interviewed about her missing husband. Explore the database as a player by typing search terms, watch the clips where she speaks those words and piece together the story. So basically, we are facing with quite a lot of work, like the work in the archive. It's very much imitating the same kind of things that historians are facing in the archives. And it makes you, as a player, to kind of reflect who made this database, under what conditions it was made, what might be missing. This is exactly what historians are doing inside games. And then I took Carlos Ginzburg, The Cheese and the Worms, talking about this Menocchio, a miller. He was investigated because he has very radical ideas. He was thinking that the universe was created by worms that was sitting in the moon and so forth. And his voice reached up reach us only through the interrogations of the Inquisition. This raises problems of evidence because we cannot speak with Menocchio. What the archive actually tell us is what the investigation was asking him. So here's some Barlow version of The Cheese and the Worms, and a game based on The Cheese and the Worms, which I hope some of you might want to play, if it was existed, would need to work on two levels. The first one is the primary sources, a narrative built from inquisitorial records. But the second layer is the interpretation that places one life within wider social trends. So first level is easy. The framework of Sam Barlow can work to do this kind of mechanics where only one side of the conversation appear. It could simulate archival asymmetry. It can, the player task is to piece fragments of information, which are all true fragments of the things that were taken from the documents, as you can see here, different pages in Ginsburg work, and pieces together as animation. What we do with this? This is the second challenge, which is much more tougher. It's the generalizability in Ginsburg method, because he was not only working in the archive to find the story of Menocchio. From this, he wants to tell something much more profound on the period. He wants to talk about autonomous current of peasant radicalization. So he showed how oral tradition, print, local beliefs shapes is the fact that we have Menocchio in the Inquisition. So printing gave Menocchio the words to challenge what he knew, and the Reformation gave him the confidence to voice those ideas to the priest, then to his neighbors, and finally, he found himself in the Inquisition. So the current framework of Barlow games are very good to reconstruct the story of Menocchio. But once we want to engage a player with a deeper level of analysis, we are risking to be a little more didactic. This is not part of the framework which are currently in the game, and we kind of need to invent a way to do it. So it's much more difficult. Here's again, where he is, it's much more narratology, although there is a way to see the films as we want, and it's individuality because it's a microhistory and so forth. So to conclude, historians can make their argument playable by creating games or using them as or in research, and to treat this work as part of both history and game studies. This is not easy because many still see games as trivial. Most historians, established historians, lack design skills, and not every argument works in game form. This is what I try to inspect in the article. The risks include oversimplification or lack of recognition. But these are not barriers. Of course, they invite us to ask when and how can a history be best expressed as a game. And these are my references, and I will conclude with one initiative I try to do. Oh, right, okay. So one initiative I try to do to convey historians to touch games or to think about games is this is a platform which is done by a colleague from Italy, Andrea Nanetti, that works in China. Maybe some of you heard about him, and he has this kind of baby engineering historical memory that try to do digital history and visualizations and to convey historian. This is a platform for historians to convey them. Okay, I want to use this kind of technologies. I have an idea where I should start. So we kind of develop together now this kind of database. It's I don't like this form, but this is his job. So it's with a lot of, let's say, a guide, the basic guide. How should I start? Where I should find games that have some that were created already by historians, because there are some. What can I do as an historian? So forth, to give them first, and maybe to be the ambassador who kind of make them the first steps. So this opens also, I convey his idea. If anyone else wants to collaborate on this kind of platform to work with historians, with other VR, XR, whatever the technologies, it will be
So any questions? Δεν βλέπω κάποιον άλλον.
It's a very good question. I didn't mention Assassin's Creed and no Assassin's Creed educational tour because I think it's not history. It's a depiction of history. It's visualization of history. Yes, you can learn something if you are, but if you want to learn a thesis, if you want to convey a thesis, it doesn't exist in these games. It's a because this was not the objective of the games. So as long as, and this is, there is a lot of research about this, as long as the historians are in a consultant, somebody comes to you, I need a new weapon from the 15th century, which existed in Bavaria, and then you give them something that existed in France in the 17th century. He said, fine, and he goes on because he doesn't have a power. So maybe not as a creator by himself, but as co-creators. And the examples that I saw was really created by historians. I think to do history is more difficult to do an indie game. It's possible to be a co-creator, to team up with a designer, definitely, but they have to be in power to make decisions. Otherwise, they will be minor just for the disclaimer based on historical fact. And that's it.
Yes, so there's more people, so I'm gonna allow one more question, maybe. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah. It's definitely an arch. There's no like a black and white. You can do a lot of things, and I fully accept games which are totally fictional in setting, in historical setting. But I say that there is a genre, and I would even argue that there is a demand for a more deeply engaged games with history. And in this sense, you can do two things. Either you do a thesis, you have something to say, because when we do history, nobody do the we don't have a real way. We are always subjective. I have a thesis how history was looking, which is completely okay that somebody else will say it differently. So what I want to say is that the player understand my thesis, what I want to say, and not only play in a Roman setting in the Colosseum and slay some monsters. And the second thing is that you can teach people how history is constructed by the fact that they are working as an archive, like video archives for this, in a much more simplified way. But the deduction, we are assembling the story in our heads, basically, where we read some stuff, we have to make the connection, for example, in this example, and then we understand something that I do in the archive.
Just because it's gonna be a big injustice, please, if you have a question, and please, if you have a short answer. Go ahead.
like to comment that I think we need more historians to game design than more like pick a game designer and go to historians, because all those games, as you said, they're mainstream, they're amazing, they have a lot to say, but most of the times it's fictional, and people already history has so many things to become enjoyable and play and have fun. So that's mostly it. I think the research is amazing, and it should be more young people should be learning history through games, because they are already enjoying them. And I think that would be my opinion as a gamer and as a person that enjoys history as well.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Yeah.